Have you ever noticed that the words that keep you up at night are never the ones that were shouted? They're the ones that were whispered in a tone of concern, the ones that came with a gentle hand on your shoulder and the phrase, "I'm only telling you this because I care." Those are the words that burrow, not because of their volume, but because of the moment you felt yourself agree, the moment you thought, "They're right, I am like that." And in that tiny invisible nod, you didn't just hear something, you signed a contract. You think they hurt you. But look closer. The injury isn't in the delivery. It's in the receipt. You remember the scene. You standing in a kitchen, or maybe it's an office, or maybe it's just a text thread that won't stop glowing in your mind. The words were simple. You have a pattern of pushing people away. And you felt it like a key turning in a lock you didn't know you'd installed. Because 3 years ago, a different person said something similar, and you accepted it then. You accepted that your boundaries were walls, your independence was isolation, your self-protection was rejection of others. So today, when these new words arrive, they don't feel like an observation. They feel like confirmation of a verdict you already delivered on yourself. The pain isn't from what they said. It's from what you accepted as true the moment you heard it. Here's the disruption. You believe you're being wounded by external attacks, but you're actually being collared by internal agreements. Every word that lands is a word that matches a belief you've already filed away as fact. And the most dangerous beliefs are the ones you accepted before you had the language to question them. The ones you swallowed in childhood when you were told you were too sensitive for crying, too much for needing, selfish for wanting. You didn't just hear those words, you metabolized them. They became the filter through which you now process every new piece of information about yourself. You are not being hurt by words. You are being reminded of the contract you signed with yourself before you knew you had a choice. Now an open loop. What if the words you think are hurting you are actually trying to show you where you're still enslaved to an old agreement? What if the sting is a signal, not a sentence? Let me show you a scenario that feels like I was there. You're at dinner with friends. Someone tells a story about a friend who is so dramatic, always making everything about them. You laugh along, but your chest tightens, because last week you expressed a feeling to this same group, and now you're wondering if they were talking about you. You don't ask, you just accept that they were. You accept that you are the person who takes up too much emotional space. So for the rest of the night, you go quiet. You perform easygoing. You disappear. The words weren't about you, but the acceptance was. And now you're living in a reality that you built from a belief you never questioned. The pattern recognition here is subtle but devastating. You are not scanning conversations for information. You are scanning them for confirmation. Your mind is running a constant background process called, does this match what I believe about myself? And the answer is almost always yes, because you have a confirmation bias so refined it would make a scientist weep. You notice the one comment that could be interpreted as criticism and ignore the 10 that are clearly affection. You highlight the micro-expression that might be annoyance and delete the memory of the smile. You are not perceiving reality. You are projecting your accepted identity onto reality and calling it perception. The internal mechanism is called identity resonance. Words are frequencies. Your beliefs are tuning forks. When a word matches the frequency of a belief, it vibrates. That vibration is what you call hurt. But it's not pain, it's activation. It's the feeling of a dormant belief waking up and stretching its legs. And the reason it feels so bad is because that belief is always toxic. It's always some version of, I'm not okay as I am. And that belief is a liar. But you've accepted as your most trusted advisor. Let's expose the identity implication. You have become a detective of your own flaws. But you're not investigating, you're decorating. You're taking each accepted criticism and hanging it on the walls of your identity like art. See, here's the proof I'm difficult. Here's the proof I'm too much. Here's the proof I'm unlovable. You've curated a museum of your own inadequacy, and you give tours to anyone whose words you let buy a ticket. The docent is your ego, and the ego's job is to protect the collection at all costs, even if it means keeping you in pain. Because pain is familiar, and familiar is safe. A sudden question to spike retention. Why does a stranger's insult bounce off while a loved one's observation shatters? Because you have an internal hierarchy of whose acceptances count. You've given certain people VIP access to your identity. You think it's because you trust them, but it's actually because you never got full approval from them, so you're still trying to earn it. You're still taking their words as gospel because you're hoping the next one will be the one that finally says, "You're okay." But they can't give you that. Only you can withdraw your acceptance of the opposite. Now, a scenario that will feel like I'm reading your messages. You get a text from your partner. "Can we talk tonight?" Just that. 4 words. But your system goes into red alert. Why? Because you've accepted that "we need to talk" is code for you've done something wrong. That acceptance came from a previous relationship where every serious conversation was a trial. So now, you spend the entire day preparing your defense, bracing for impact, rehearsing apologies for crimes you haven't committed. When you finally talk, it's about a vacation idea, but you've already lived through the worst-case scenario. Because you accepted that their words would be an attack, you created the pain before they created the conversation. The behavioral pattern here is preemptive acceptance. You don't wait to hear what they say. You accept what you fear they'll say, and you live inside that acceptance as if it's already happened. This is why you feel exhausted by relationships. You're not just having one conversation. You're having the conversation, the trial run, the aftermath, and the self-prosecution all before the actual words are spoken. You're not reacting to reality. You're maintaining a belief system that requires constant rehearsal. Here's the contradiction that breaks this open. You think you have low self-esteem, but you have unwavering faith in your negative beliefs. You defend them like a religion. You collect evidence like a zealot. You are not lacking conviction. You are profoundly convicted, just in the wrong direction. Your identity instability isn't that you don't know who you are. It's that you've accepted a false identity with such tenacity that you think it's the only one available. Let's go deeper into the ego and self-image. Your ego is not your enemy, it's your protector. But it's protecting a self-image made of acceptances, not truths. When someone says, "You're being defensive," and you feel rage, that's not your true self being attacked. That's your ego defending the image of you as open and reasonable. The rage isn't because they're wrong. It's because they're right, and you've accepted that being defensive is bad. So now you're defending against the accusation of being defensive, which is meta-defensiveness, and the whole thing is a house of cards built on the acceptance that you must never appear as that kind of person. A scenario to ground this. You're in a meeting. You present an idea. A colleague says, "That's one way to look at it." You feel dismissed. But why? Because you've accepted that your ideas must be validated as brilliant or they're worthless. You've accepted that neutral feedback is negative feedback. So you spend the rest of the meeting silent, building a case against this colleague, deciding they're jealous, incompetent, out to get you. You're not protecting your idea. You're protecting your accepted identity as the smart one. And the threat isn't real. It's a belief being poked. The perception versus reality gap is where this gets surgical. You think you're seeing the world as it is, but you're seeing it through a lens ground by every acceptance you've ever made. When you look at a neutral face, you see disapproval. If you've accepted you're unlikable. When you hear silence, you hear rejection. If you've accepted you're forgettable. You're not perceiving, you're projecting. And then you call your projection reality and use it as evidence that the acceptance was correct. It's a closed loop that no amount of external validation can break, because external validation gets filtered through the same lens and distorted to match the belief. A sudden realization for retention. The words that hurt you most are the ones that contradict the performance you're putting on. If you're performing low maintenance, the word needy will cut. If you're performing chill, the word intense will sting. The pain isn't about truth. It's about exposure. It's about the moment your accepted belief peeks through the mask you've built to hide it. And the mask is exhausting. Now, a scenario that reveals the social dynamics. You're with a new friend. You're being careful, curated, showing them your best self. They say you seem so put together. You should be flattered. Instead, you feel panic. Why? Because you've accepted that your real self is a mess, and you believe they're seeing the performance, not the person. So now you feel like a fraud. You feel lonely, despite being seen. Because you know that if they saw what you've accepted as the real you, they'd leave. So their compliment becomes proof of your isolation. You've accepted that you are unlovable in your natural state. So any love that comes to the performance feels like a threat to the truth. The awareness gap is widening. You can start to see it now. The moment between their words and your acceptance is not instantaneous. It's just fast. There is a microbeat where the words are just sounds, just data. But you've trained your nervous system to skip that beat, to jump straight to meaning, to belief, to identity. And in that jump, you lose your power. You lose the choice. You think you're being wounded, but you're actually wounding yourself at lightning speed. Here's a behavioral pattern that will feel like I'm mapping your brain. You have a belief confirmation checklist that runs in the background of every interaction. Did they hesitate before responding? Check. Did they use a qualifier like I guess or maybe? Check. Did they look away? Check. Each check mark is a piece of evidence you collect to support the accepted belief, and you collect it so automatically that you think you're observing. But you're not observing, you're hunting. You're hunting for proof that the story you've accepted is still true. Because if it's not true, you don't know who you are. And that uncertainty feels like death to the ego, a contradiction to sit with. You want to be known, but you believe that being known means being rejected. So you perform a self that is rejection-proof, but also connection-proof. And then you accept the lack of connection as proof that the original belief was right. See, I am unlovable. But you never offered love a target. You offered a decoy. And the arrow went where you aimed it. Let's go darker for a moment, because this is where the intensity lives. The reason you can't let go of these accepted beliefs is that they are tied to your earliest survival. When you were small, accepting I'm too much meant you learned to be less. That lessness kept you safe. It kept you in the fold. So now when someone says something that brushes against that old acceptance, your system doesn't just hear words. It hears a survival threat. It hears if you become too much again, you will be abandoned. And the pain you feel is the pain of that original abandonment, compressed into a millisecond. You're not just hearing the present, you're reliving the past acceptance that kept you alive. A scenario that makes this visceral: you're in a relationship. Your partner says, I need space. The words are neutral. But you hear, I need space from you. And you hear that because you've accepted that your presence is a burden. That acceptance came from a parent who was overwhelmed by your childhood energy, who told you to go play when you wanted to connect. So now, I need space isn't a request. It's confirmation that you are, at your core, too much to be around. You don't ask what kind of space they need. You withdraw completely. You punish yourself for being too much. You've accepted the meaning so fully that you can't hear the actual words. The ego exposure here is total. Your ego isn't protecting you from pain. It's protecting you from the realization that the pain is self-generated. that you are the author of your own wound. Because if you saw that, you'd have to take responsibility for the story you've been telling. And that story is the only identity you've known. So the ego fights awareness with everything it has. It says, don't look closer. Don't question the acceptance. Just keep blaming them for saying the words. Because blaming them keeps you safe from the terror of self-authorship. But here's the perspective shift that changes everything. What if the words you accepted were never about you in the first place? What if "you're too much" was a statement about the speaker's capacity, not your size? What if "you're difficult" was a confession of their own inflexibility? When you accept their limitation as your definition, you take on a costume that was never meant to fit, and you wear it so long you think it's skin, a retention spike. What if the words that hurt are actually pointing to the exact place where you're ready to be free? The sting is just the feeling of a belief being loosened. It's the discomfort of a lie being exposed. You've been interpreting it as damage, but it's actually a door opening. You just keep slamming it shut because what's on the other side is unknown. A scenario to lock this in: your journaling. You write, "I feel like I'm always behind." You accept that thought as fact. You don't question it, you build on it. That's why I can't relax. That's why I don't deserve a break. But where did "always behind" come from? You trace it back to a 7th grade teacher who said you were a late bloomer. You accepted that then. You accepted that your timeline was wrong. And now, 20 years later, you're still rushing to catch up to a timeline that was never yours. The acceptance has become a life sentence. The awareness gap is now visible. You can practice standing in it. Next time words come at you, pause. Not to respond, but to witness. Watch the acceptance mechanism try to activate. Feel the pull to agree, to confirm, to add to the collection. And in that micro moment, ask, is this mine to accept? Not is this true, but does this belong to me? Most of the time you'll find it's just a ghost from someone else's story, trying to find a home in yours. The behavioral pattern to shift is not from sensitive to thick-skinned. It's from automatic acceptance to conscious discernment. You don't need to stop feeling. You need to stop believing every feeling is a fact. You need to stop accepting that your emotional response is evidence of truth. It's just evidence of activation, and activation is not identity. A final scenario: you're meditating. A thought arises, you're not doing this right. You feel the familiar sting. You start to accept it, but this time you notice. You see the acceptance mechanism reaching for the thought, ready to make it part of the story, and you just don't. You let the thought be a thought. You let the words be words. You don't accept them as you, and in that moment you feel something you haven't felt in years. Space. The space between you and the belief. The space where you actually live. The open loop you're left with is this: if you are not the sum of your accepted beliefs, then what are you? And more dangerously, what becomes possible when you stop accepting the limits that were never yours to begin with? The answer isn't a new identity. It's the end of identity as a fixed thing. It's the beginning of you as a dynamic process that cannot be defined by any word, any belief, any acceptance. You are the one who notices. And that is enough. That is everything. And the words, they just keep falling, like leaves, like rain, like things that were never meant to be carried in the first place.